Morning everybody, Phil Henry here from Capricornia Chamber of Commerce. As we've been foreshadowing for the last couple of weeks, we're going to be doing interviews with the candidates for the forthcoming state election for the seats of Rockhampton and Keppel. We've reached out to the candidates, and those interviews that we'll be posting are from those candidates who have got back to us and agreed to do the interview. Each of those candidates will have been given their questions a day in advance. There are 6 questions and they get 2 minutes to answer, and we'll be giving them a little bit of a nod as they're coming to the end of their time. They'll also get a minute at the end just to do a wrap up if they want to do. So without further ado, on to the candidates. So the next person we're talking to is Christian Shepherd from Katters Australia Party, standing for the seat of Rockhampton. Thanks for joining us today, Christian.
No worries, Phil.
Terrific. So you've had some questions. Your time ready to answer?
Yep.
Terrific. All right, I'll start off with the first one. It's become traditional for parties to announce their priorities for the first 100 days of government.
Yep.
What are your priorities for the first 100 days of government, Christian?
My priorities for the first 100 days will be repealing the land vegetation management laws, reducing power prices as much as possible, establishing a state development area in Gracemere, delivering some funding for the CQU TAFE Centre of Excellence, and making sure that we do everything possible to support industry. It's my view that the easiest and the most available growth for us is economically is industrial, agricultural, and in manufacturing. It's these 3 areas that we can get quick returns and big returns on investment. And so if we're going to have another economic boom in Rockhampton, I believe that's how it's going to happen.
Okay, next question, Christian, is about basically making the business environment better. As identified by Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland and the Capricornia Chamber, a business-friendly environment is a key prerequisite for a healthy small business economy. One major concern for regional businesses is the number of institutional barriers in place that prevent local businesses from giving fair and equitable access to major projects. Many government departments have both published regulations but of more concern opaque and discretionary practices that act as barriers. Given the high number of construction and infrastructure projects in this region, what would you do to fix this situation?
I think it's absolutely vital that local businesses can compete and that we can sustain ourselves as a local economy. Most of the time when a big project goes to a big company, whether it's down south from Brisbane or Sydney or something like that, it's local contractors doing the work anyway. They tend to get subcontracted. So it's obvious that we're capable of doing the work, but obviously there's some barriers to those companies securing those contracts. So whether that is trivial paperwork and hoops that they need to jump through, we obviously need to look at that and see what we can do to make sure that we're supporting our local economy. A sad example of it is a local landscaping contract that went to a southern company instead of Betterscapes, and then Betterscapes shortly closed down after. So while that might not have been the sole cause, surely it was a contributor, and it shows that we need to support local businesses as often as possible.
Next question, infrastructure. So what are your infrastructure priorities for this region, Christian?
My infrastructure priorities would be the Gracemere State High School, getting that built, getting the CQ TAFE Centre of Excellence started, putting in some investment for infrastructure within the Gracemere Stanwell State Development Area, so that there's actually infrastructure there waiting to be used, and we're not having to wait for a long application process where if someone wants to come in and build, then they're having to wait to do that. My focus is on projects that will generate revenue and that will actually create jobs. There's a lot of talk that goes on about road projects and that sort of thing, creating jobs, which they don't really do. They temporarily support jobs. As soon as that road project is done, the funding stops, that's it, and it's got a maintenance bill attached to it, not a revenue stream. So I'm all about supporting projects that are going to generate ongoing sustainable jobs and have a revenue stream, rather than ones that just take money and then have a maintenance bill attached.
Okay, next question. Availability of sufficient affordable baseload power while reducing net emissions from energy sources is a key component of economic sustainability. What's your view of this objective and how would you achieve it?
I don't see how emissions play into economic sustainability. While it obviously is important to look after the environment wherever we can, it's important not to muddy the two, in my opinion. If there's a public consensus that we need to reduce emissions, then of course, we should do that. As far as maintaining a power base load goes, Stanwell Corporation have been doing experiments with hydrogen, so their project might lead into the Rockhampton region being able to have a hydrogen power source, and obviously in the very far future, perhaps nuclear or thorium or some sort of fission that can provide us with that big base load we need, while still obviously lowering emissions or reduce or cutting them out completely. My focus, as I've said, is manufacturing, heavy industry and agriculture. All of those can be very power intensive, so it's important that we get power prices as low as possible and as reliable as possible. So I'd definitely be looking for ways to make sure that we can sustainably and reliably provide a large base load so that Rockhampton can have the economic boom that it needs.
Next question. It's become apparent in recent years that the education and skills system, particularly apprenticeships, has failed to keep pace with business and industry needs. What would you do to rectify the situation in this region?
As I've said, I'm the only candidate who's pledged to fund the entire amount for the CQ TAFE Centre of Excellence. As well as that, I've committed to funding more nurse practitioner and nurse practitioner candidate positions within Rockhampton. So not just trade skills that we need, it's also skills in areas like nursing as well. As far as education, there's improvements that we can make pretty much across the board. The school curriculum seems as though it's strayed quite a little while away from being just your traditional arithmetic and literature. So bringing that under control, where we're not relying on teachers to sort of be surrogate parents for children and raise them within certain ideologies. I'm not saying that it's rampant, but I've heard that in schools they're trying to teach kids not to eat meat and that sort of thing. That's really not the role of teachers to be doing. If teachers want to share with the children that they themselves are a vegetarian, so be it. But we really need to make sure that the school system is focusing on preparing children for the workforce, preparing them for university, preparing them for trades, and not worrying so much about the moral and ideological side of growing up, which is the parents' job.
So the last question, particularly since the onset of COVID-19, but also reflecting the global marketplace, businesses need to better understand the digital online world and also have access to stable high-speed internet. What are your policies to help local businesses understand e-commerce and to access the digital world?
I think the single greatest thing we can do in the online sphere is improve access to internet. So I find it unusual or even unforgivable that in areas like this we've got mobile black spots. Mobile 4G is quite fast. Even in regional areas we shouldn't really have black spots. When you've got transmission towers that can obviously beam a fairly significant distance, we should be investing in infrastructure to make sure that we provide that. As far as the education for the operating a business in the online sphere goes, I think that the role of the government in that should be rather limited. While obviously it's beneficial for all to learn about how to navigate that sort of business environment, I don't think that the government would be the best or most efficient organisation to be doing that. There's a lot of information online that's free, or you can pay small amounts for tutoring, and that would, I imagine, suffice rather than increasing the bureaucracy, which probably won't have a measured return on it. So that we're not just throwing money in a pit for something that feels good and feels like we're being productive. You've got the buggy whip salesman that went out of business in whatever early 1900s or something, and no one stepped in to save them. So I'm all for supporting business as long as it's viable and as long as it's going to actually have a measured return on what we're spending on it.
Okay, Christian, that's the end of the prepared questions, but I'll give you a minute if you like. Please give us a wrap up of who you are and what you're standing for and what you want to do.
Well, the simple fact is with this election that Rockhampton doesn't need to vote for a major party. If you like some of the ALP's policies, if you like some of the LNP policies, well, one of them are going to take control of the state on October 31. But their policies that they're going to roll out statewide as a blanket policy, Rockhampton will get them regardless. But by voting for Katter's Australian Party and helping us secure the balance of power, we can get strong representation in here so that we can get more on top of that. We've seen the pressure that competition and minor parties can put on the major parties just with this this election campaign, where they've started to splash a little bit more cash than they used to. So if you can imagine that over 1, 2, 3 election cycles, Rockhampton is really going to benefit. One thing about the major parties is that when they've got a problem, they just throw money at it. And I'm more than happy to be a thorn in a major party's side to make sure that they throw a lot of money at the Rockhampton region.